Hello, podcast family. This is Jeff K with My Digital Memories and our podcast with Before 1950 Memory Lane. And today our guest is Nancy Delain, and she is going to talk to us about her father and mom's exploits during World War II. So, Nancy, please feel free, and the floor is yours.
Oh, hi, Jeff. So let me share my screen here real quick. And what I'm going to do is I don't have slides, share screen. Okay. It's easiest with two monitors. Okay. All right. Share screen, and we'll go. No, I don't want to share. I want to share entire screen, and we'll share this screen. Boom. All right. You should see something up there called flight rules. Am I right?
I don't see anything.
You don't see anything. So it says stop screen. So according to this, so I'm going to try stopping my screen. Okay, if StreamYard is sharing my screen. Okay, fine. It tells me the screen. So this is my dad. And I'm hoping that people can see it. It says that StreamYard is sharing my screen, so we'll hope.
Okay, yes. Okay. We're good.
Okay, this is my dad as he was entering the U.S. Navy at the beginning not the beginning of World War II, but when the U.S. entered World War II. Beginning of World War II, we weren't actually, there you go. We were not actually in the war. But in 1942, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, that was the entryway of the United States into World War II. And my dad signed up with the Navy very shortly thereafter, because the bombing of Pearl Harbor really pissed people off, and my dad was among the people it pissed off. So he was a college kid at the time, and he went down to the naval office and he signed up and he got his uniform and he got his picture taken. And I'm really glad he's got his picture taken because I love that picture. Okay, and he signed up for the Navy, and he went to school. I guess they went to boot camp in Illinois and Indiana. And these are the letters home. And the reason I wanted to show pictures of the envelopes is that there's this word here, free. Evidently, and I did not know this, evidently the boys who were in basic training and going into the war could send mail home for free, which was we don't do that these days. Wow. So I just wanted to show that. And then they did some fun stuff as well as be serious. My dad was kind of into doing fun stuff, and so they threw this little party called the Happy Hour, and it looks like it was probably just a musical review, and they were doing Anchors Away. They were doing there was a foxtrot. They were doing all kinds of fun stuff that young kids do, and stuff that I just plain don't picture my father doing, and then he graduated from midshipman school, and he went to what's called the V-12 program. And that was a communication program at was that the one at Harvard? No, that was in Richmond. And he went to the V-12 program, and then he got commissioned an ensign in the United States Naval Reserve. And at that point, he was at the beck and call of the United States Navy. And the first place they sent him was to Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk, Virginia, my dad grew up in Portsmouth, which is right across the bay from Norfolk. So basically, he was going home with these orders, and so he was really happy to get his orders going home. But they didn't last all that long, because after he went to Norfolk and finished school there, got ordered to the Pacific. and these are his orders going to report to the Commandant, 12th Naval District, for the first available government transport to the port in which the Commander Service Force Pacific Fleet may be, and upon arrival, report to the Commander Service Force Pacific Fleet for duty in the Commander Service Force Pacific Fleet communications pool. So
now I got a question.
Yeah.
Now, I believe you said you're writing a book about all this.
I'm taking notes at this moment, and it's going to be kind of a fun book right now. Right now I'm still going through the source material, which is, these are things from my father's scrapbook, which is actually in my brother's possession, and my brother very kindly digitized the pictures. I have to get him to digitize the rest of the pages, but we'll get there. But yeah, I've got a book in the back of my head about my dad's and about my parents' World War II experiences.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
It should be a fun one. It should be a fun one coming up. After he got got his orders to the Pacific, and then he went and he joined the commander of the Amphibian Forces of the Pacific, or the COMSFIPS-PAC. Easier to say COMSFIPS-PAC than it is to say Commander of Amphibious Forces Pacific. At the time, he was an ensign, and he was reporting for communication duty to the. It doesn't tell him where at this point. But this was, as you see, this was in December 1944. This was right before his birthday. His birthday was December 21st. And then he got temporary additional duty, again, to, at this point, he was on the USS El Dorado. And let's see if I can find my picture of the El Dorado here. Where did it go? Come on, where's my list? Put it down, didn't I? That was dumb. Let me go. Okay, my apologies for taking my time about this, but I'd rather show things in order than not.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Let me go desktops. Here, and scrapbook.
You also mentioned that your mom was in the war as well.
She was. She flew an airplane. Here's the El Dorado.
Oh, cool.
We'll get to it. She flew an air. My mother was a pilot, and she and my dad were about the same age. They were both about, I don't know, 20 years old or so when the war broke out in the United States. And my mom's tour of duty was actually twofold. She was in college. She was a college girl. And during the summers, she had a job. And her job was to go into the gun factories and drill the bore holes for the rifles. Bore the barrels for the rifle, but drill the hole in the barrel that the bullet goes through. And but she also did some volunteer work for the Civil Air Patrol, and I have here her pin for her Civil Air Patrol work. And
oh wow,
isn't that cool?
That's wild.
Yeah, and what she did was she flew a small general aviation plane, up and down the coast of Maryland, Virginia, DC, maybe Delaware, looking for German U-boats, looking for invasion across the Atlantic. She never saw any, and she was always very glad that she never saw anything, because she told me that her plane did not have a radio, so she would not have been able to tell anybody that she saw any that she saw the U-boats had she seen them. So she was always very happy not to have to report that with her non-radio that she didn't have to
Wow.
she was always very glad not to see the U-boats. But going back to my dad now. Here's the El Dorado, which is
Wow.
which is actually Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner's flagship, and Admiral Turner was the commander-in-chief of Comsfibpac, and he was the commander of things like Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Those two invasions. He was the guy, and my dad was one of his communications officers. So let's see, where are we here? But before, he took the El Dorado from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor, and by this time they had pretty much cleaned up Pearl Harbor. It was no longer. I don't see any pictures of bombed out.
Yeah, we know
yeah.
what you're talking. Yeah.
But he was stationed in Pearl Harbor for a little while they, and he told me that the boat ride from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor was the worst experience of his life. He spent the whole time being seasick, but then he had his sea legs and he was fine for the rest of the war. And there his return to usual duties orders, together with a picture of Admiral Kelly, Admiral Turner, so Dad really admired this guy, and this is actually a better picture of Admiral Turner. His name was Richmond Kelly Turner, and he led the amphibious forces in the Pacific. And there's the El Dorado again. I'm just going to get rid of that. And they went from Pearl Harbor, and they went across the ocean, and one of their stops was a small island called Iwo Jima. And Iwo Jima was one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific. They fought that for days and days and days. And the problem with Iwo Jima was that it was a volcanic mountain. And volcanoes tend to leave lots of caves, which means that people can hide in the caves, which means that it was just hell on earth trying to get. The Japanese were very well entrenched into Iwo Jima, and it was just hell on earth trying to get them out. They were using flame guns, they were using machine guns, they were using mortars. It was just, and meanwhile, the bullets and the flame guns were raining down on the Marines on the beaches. It was a horrible place. But they did eventually take Iwo Jima, and my dad actually saw not the second flag go up on Iwo, but he saw the first flag go up on Iwo Jima. The first flag was a small flag that they put up on top of Mount Suribachi. Okay, and the commander of the Marines saw this flag and went, no. We need to get a better flag. So they got this ginormous flag to go up on the top of Mount Suribachi, and they did this pose, and so that's the famous image of the soldiers putting the flag up on Iwo Jima. They made a statue out of that picture as well, and but that was the second flag to go up. My dad did not see the second flag go up. He saw the first flag go up, the one that they, I call it the real flag. So this was an article. This was an article about the Battle of Iwo Jima that lives in my dad's scrapbook, and then together.
Is that a newspaper article?
I'm sorry, say again?
Is that a newspaper article?
It's a newspaper article. It was from the New York Times.
What's the date on it?
March 17th, 1945.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not the Times. It's the New York Sun, which no longer exists. but March 17th, 1945, and it's a pretty good article. And my dad clipped out, he clipped out the entire article, and it talks about battle-weary Marines brought up tanks, flamethrowers, and demolition units today for what may be the final assault on a long, high bluff in the northeastern tip of Iwo Jima, where the major force of the surviving Japanese are still entrenched. Many caves which spot the cliffs could conceal several thousand, if that many survived the long battle. After 22 days of the most bitter fighting in Marine history, the Japanese have been driven into a rugged area which roughly is about 1 mile deep and takes in 2 miles of coastline. A small pocket also remains to be cleaned up on the northeast sector, but for all practical purposes, the entire East Coast is now held by the Americans. And it goes on. It goes on. But together with the newspaper articles, there were reporters on board. There were radio reporters on board. So they had their, they did their scripts. And my dad, they printed out, they typed out the scripts and handed them off, I guess, to the soldiers to the sailors on the ships. And so those are actually two of the scripts. And then they did an interview with Admiral Kelly, and this is the script for that interview with Admiral Kelly. And so far, I've shown nothing but writing, but here we have an aerial shot of the ships landing on Iwo Jima.
Oh, wow.
And as you see, there were a lot of ships that landed on Iwo Jima. That was a big, big, big battle. And so this Iwo, this is, this is Iwo. So this was a news magazine shot, and something like the old Parade magazine would have run this. Here's a radio broadcast. After Iwo Jima, the Comsvib-Pac crowd went to Okinawa and conquered and took over Okinawa, and they made a big fuss. Let's see if I can get there here. No, that's not it. That's not it. There we go. They sent out a notice to the civilians in Okinawa that said, "This is a military operation. We do not want to hurt civilians. So you have a duty to stay safe." And they wrote the directions on how to stay safe as the Americans took over the Okinawa military establishment. And they wrote it in both English and in Japanese. But it was you have a duty to keep yourself safe. We do not want to hurt you, but we are going to take over this island. So stay safe.
How was that distributed?
It was probably airdropped or just thrown out thrown out the way, and it was the proclamation was Americans' objectives is to render the Japanese military powerless and not to harm civilians, all uppercase, shouted. Therefore, it is your duty and to your benefit to follow these instructions. When the American forces approach, go to the rear. When seeking shelter, do not remain with or near the troops. Never resist American troops anywhere. Remember, they intend no harm to you. Wear light-colored clothing so that you may be easily identified. Don't go through American lines until you're ordered to by the commander-in-chief of the American forces. Don't go wait until further instructions as to the time, place, and means of crossing, and never approach the American lines at night. And if you value your life, you'll follow these instructions. Pass the word around. So it was to some extent it was just hand distributed, and then it was also distributed by word of mouth. While they were in the Pacific, uh, we had an historic event at home, and that was that FDR, the president of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, died. Um, he died. Everywhere there was a service commemorating his command, and remembering him, memorial service. Um, and this was the program for the for the for that service that was held on the El Dorado. Meanwhile, however, the Japanese had absolutely no respect for the fact that the president died, and they decided to kamikaze bomb the Admiral Turner's flagship. And the little news clipping down below this is the fact that Admiral Turner had himself a pretty close call with that kamikaze pilot. The kamikaze pilot did not succeed in sinking the ship, but he did succeed in killing himself. And he did not succeed in killing Admiral Turner. But he did some damage to the El Dorado. They took over Okinawa, and they were waiting in Okinawa, and then the atomic bomb got dropped on Hiroshima, and 3 days later, the atomic bomb got dropped on Nagasaki, ending the war with Japan. And in the meantime, another guy had gotten sworn in as president of the United States, and that guy's name was Harry Truman. And Truman came from Missouri, and he thought it would be very, very cool if the USS Missouri, pictured here, was the ship on which the surrender was signed. So hey, guess what? The surrender got signed on the USS Missouri. It got signed probably it got signed, I believe on this deck. And then the Missouri, my dad got assigned to the Missouri after the war. And the Missouri did a tour, came back to Norfolk, and picked up the body of the Turkish ambassador. And the Turkish ambassador had died of natural causes during the war, and while he was in the United States. And there had been a lot of fear of shipping him home because of the German U-boats. They didn't want the body to sink to the bottom of the ocean. So after the war ended, the Americans, the Missouri went around and went through the Panama Canal and went up to Norfolk and picked up the body of the Turkish ambassador and chugged its way across the Atlantic and did a tour of the Mediterranean. And as you can see, the Missouri bristles. It's got guns. It's a battleship. And so the peaceful mission of the Missouri was to return the Turkish ambassador home. And my dad was on the ship when they did that. And he said he has never had such parties in his life. They threw party after party after party after party after party after party after party because the Turkish people were so grateful to the Americans for returning their ambassador to them. But that was not the only reason for the tour of the Missouri in the Mediterranean. Russia was there, and Russia was making very nasty noises at that time. So we wanted to show Russia that, hey, we have some guns here. We're a power too. So the tour of the Missouri in the Mediterranean was to show Russia that, take it easy. We all know that nuclear war did not happen with Russia. We are all very glad that nuclear war did not happen with Russia. We all know that the United States and Russia have had their little skirmishes over the years, but it's never been all-out war between these two countries. The way World War II was all-out war. But the United States and Russia have been on the opposite sides of several wars that we've been in over the years. But it's never been war declared between the United States and either the USSR or any state of the USSR since the USSR broke up. And part of the reason for that is the fact that Russia knows that we put our money where our mouth is in terms of defending ourselves and defending our allies. But anyway, with the tour of the Missouri, they stopped in several ports, and among those ports they stopped in was Rome, Italy. And they stopped there right around Good Friday, 1946. And didn't the Pope on Good Friday give the crew of the Missouri an audience? That is the one and only time in history that a Pope has ever given an audience to non-Catholics on Good Friday. So my dad was part of that audience. And then the Missouri finished its tour and chugged back across the Atlantic, and my dad got his orders to come home and to leave the Navy. And by that time, the mail was no longer free. That's my parents' story.
How much was a stamp back then?
It looks like it was 6 cents. That was airmail too.
Wow. Inflation just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah, no, now it's what? I don't even know how much a stamp is these days. But it's upwards of 60 cents, so it's more than 10 times. It's more than 10 times the value of that, and we pay way more than that for airmail. The 60 plus cents is for regular mail.
Absolutely fascinating story. This is why I love doing podcasts like this, because yes, what you read in your books is fantastic. It gives you a high level overview, but it doesn't give you information like this. And your dad just led an amazing life.
He did. So, he did. He after the war, he went back and he finished up his master's degree, and he got his PhD, and he spent his life teaching freshman level chemistry.
Not my best subject.
Not mine either, but there it is.
So did your parents meet in the war?
No, they didn't. They met after the war. My dad and mom, my dad was a chemistry professor, as I said. My mom was a nurse, and she was teaching student nurses, and of course student nurses have to know, guess what, chemistry. So she would escort the student nurses across from I guess they were in Norfolk General Hospital, and she would escort them over to Williamsburg, where they took chemistry at William and Mary with my dad, and that's how my parents met.
Oh wow, fantastic. So let's see. How do you think, besides the book, how do you think, so I can put on my glasses so I can see something, how do you think we can continue to honor and remember the sacrifices and the contributions of those who served during the World War II, both in the U.S. and the rest of the world?
I think you're doing that yourself. I think that telling the stories is the way to do that, because people live through their stories, and if we tell the stories, then they continue to live.
So true. Now, hindsight being 2020, now that your parents have passed, would you have any questions to ask them about this that unfortunately you didn't?
Well, my dad didn't like to talk about the war. He loved to watch the war movies, but he didn't really want to talk about the war. There is a video up on YouTube that on my YouTube channel of the one time that I ever heard my dad really go into any detail about his war experience. It's about a 35-minute video, and that's really the horse's mouth. But in terms of, I would have asked him about the day-to-day life. I would have asked him about What was it like on the ship? I would have asked him who his roommates were. Dozens of questions. Just are you still in touch with any of these people? Did you watch anybody die? Did you see anybody get killed? I am that bloodthirsty. I would have asked him that. What was it like on Iwo Jima? What was it really like on Iwo Jima? I mean, I know that the sands of Iwo Jima present a heroic image, but what was it really like? Movies never reflect what it was.
No.
No. So that's the kind of thing I would have asked him. And I would have asked my mom what kind of plane. My brother knows what kind of plane she flew. What kind of plane did you fly? Where exactly did you fly it? How did you manage to communicate with the tower if you didn't have a radio?
That was going to be my next question.
Well, you can communicate with the tower, and you can still do this. You can communicate with the tower without a radio. You can communicate with light signals. So you have a light gun on board, and you can use Morse code and communicate that way.
Well, in your opinion, what do you think are some of the most important legacies of World War II, and how do they continue to impact the world today, or you?
I think the selfless service is the biggest takeaway that we can take from World War II. We don't see that very much today.
No.
Today it's all about me, 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 me. And I didn't get that from my parents' generation. The Pearl Harbor got bombed. The whole country went to war. There was a massive pulling together. It didn't matter whether it was Republican or Democrat or independent. The only people who didn't do this were the conscientious objectors, and they served too. They didn't do the battles, but they served in other ways. So I think maybe the idea that there is something larger than me out there is the biggest lesson that we can learn from World War II. And in terms of how it affects the world today, I hope to God it does. Because I see more and more and more me, and I'm sitting here looking at the United States government, and I'm not doing it quite so much now as I was during the last administration. But I looked at the last administration, and I'm sorry, but I saw 1933 Germany. It scared the bejesus out of me, and so I see us heading down a dangerous path, and I think that maybe 100 years later, and it is almost 100 years later, we have forgotten the lessons of history, and I don't want that to happen.
I completely understand. How do you think your parents' experiences during World War II shaped their lives and perspectives over the years that followed?
I honestly don't know, but I can render a guess. My dad was my dad was a dyed-in-the-wool patriot. And he, I don't think he would have been without the war. My mom, I can't answer the question about because I honestly don't know.
Did they ever share with you some of their hardships about the war?
No. They shielded their children mightily from the war. As I said, the first indication I ever had of their war experience was that talk that my dad gave to my daughter's 8th grade social studies class.
Wow.
Plus the fact that he liked to watch war movies.
Those are some of my dad's favorites.
Yeah.
So how did your mother become interested in flying, and what motivated her to become a Civil Air Patrol pilot?
I have no idea how she became interested in flying. That's one of the questions I would have asked her if I could. But how she became what motivated her to become a Civil Air Patrol pilot? Pearl Harbor got bombed. That was, she was a woman. She could not go to war, so she did her bit here. By that time, in 1945, she was not yet in nursing school, so she could not be, she couldn't go over and be a nurse. But I think probably the war probably had some influence on her choosing to go into nursing. Her father was a physician, and I think that was more of an influence on her choosing a medical career than the war was. But I'm sure that the war kind of pushed her over the edge, because she graduated from a 4-year nursing program in 1949. So that says she probably entered it in 1945, which is right after the war.
Wow. Now, we briefly touched on the book that you're now taking notes for.
Contemplating.
That's in its infancy. It's in infancy at this point.
Yes.
But what inspired you to start writing that book?
The fact that I think my parents' memories need to be honored. And
Amen.
I think I'm the person to do it.
Love it. So, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think, other than thanking you for having me on the podcast, it's been a real pleasure to share this stuff and to to get all this stuff digitized. Also, it's been sitting around in paper form for a long time, and to get it. This podcast was the impetus to put it up on the internet and in digital form. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the shameless plug. But as you know, before 1950 Memory Lane, this podcast is sponsored by my other company, My Digital Memories. And what we do is we do digitize. So if in restoration. So if there's any way that we can help you, we would love to do it.
I will share this with my brother, and because he's the keeper of all of this stuff. And as I look through it, I see that there are pages behind the stuff that he took pictures of. And I'm sitting there going, I need to see those pages, Jim. I need to see those pages. And I very much, it would be asking an awful lot of him to digitize the pages, but it's not asking an awful lot of him to get in touch with you and have the pages digitized. That'd be great.
We'd love to do it. And then one of the other things I will mention a note. The Before 1950 Memory Lane podcast is going to be changing. So we are changing our name to Preserving the Past, Inspiring the Future. Because as you mentioned, the takeaways from this story are incredible. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about before 1950.
No, it's about what we learn.
Exactly.
What we learn.
And it's funny. I also did a post yesterday, and it's not just people that inspire; it's also pets that inspire us. Mm-hmm. So we're branching out a little bit.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're talking about pets, I've got a pile of those. So.
Service dogs are a wonderful thing.
Service dogs are great. As our service animals are great. They don't have to be dogs.
This is true. Well, on that note, everybody, Nancy's information is at the bottom of the screen. And Nancy, if you want to give a shout out about that YouTube video and the channel, if you have it.
I can find it real quick. Hang on. Let me get there. Let's see. I can go here. Come on. Here. Come on. Safari. Very good. Okay. New Safari. And we'll go here. And we'll go YouTube. And we go. Huckabee Baum. There we go. Here we go. It's called My Father's War. And there it is.
Simple 30-second method.
And of course, we're going to have an ad first, but
it's so easy. You can do it from the
Well,
comfort.
My Father's War. Well, if you guys haven't checked it out,
And while the Allies won that conflict, the aftermath was a disaster.
if you guys haven't checked that out, I encourage you to check it out.
Inflation was just
I have watched it. It's amazing.
we just, there you go.
Thank you. If you guys haven't checked that out, I highly encourage it. It's an amazing video. I learned a lot. And if you want to be on my podcast, and if you have an incredible story to tell, please reach out to me. We would love to hear from you. Just go to just go to my website, mydigitalmemories.com. And we'd love to either get an email from you, a phone call, and we'd love to have you. So, Nancy, on that, we so much appreciate it. What a fantastic story. And God bless.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.